Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our Conversations with presentation with Dr. Linda Larkey. First, we want to have a few introductory comments about our sponsor and how to participate in the presentation today. So we are sponsored by Edgar Cayce's Association for Research and Enlightenment, which is the Edgar Cayce organization. Founded during his lifetime. He was one of America's most influential mystics and psychics. And the organization continues to provide support for spirituality, for study, for use of the Edgar Cayce health readings, since most of his readings did deal with health, and that's going to be one of our topics today. So if you want to learn more about the Edgar Cayce organization, here is the website, www.edgarcayce.org. And also there are study groups that are meeting virtually and throughout the US that are for people who are interested in applying the readings to their lives in order to become more spiritual. And we have those here in Southern California also. This is Joyce Scott, in case you were wondering. I'm your host. I am the coordinator for the A.R.E in Southern California, or excuse me, Los Angeles, and also the author of Magenta Nation, which is a book about using spirituality to bring America together. The Conversations With series is a series of dialogues with leaders on spirit and science. That's our intersection of how we see how spirit is being demonstrated through scientific study and how scientific research might apply to what we need to know to heal ourselves today and in our world. Today's guest is Dr. Linda Larkey, whom I have been very privileged to know for a long time, since we both worked at the Edgar Cayce Clinic in Phoenix, Arizona. She went on to earn her doctorate. She's now a health promotion expert and has one of, I think, the most dream jobs available, researching integrative medicine. She's a professor at the Edson College of Nursing and Health Innovation. She spends a considerable amount of her time in research. She's been funded for over a dozen research grants, including multi-year grants from the National Institutes of Health and other organizations. So today we're going to be talking about what we may know about health and healing, given the advice in the Edgar Cayce readings, and how that jives with the scientific research, what it's telling us today, and what some of the new findings are for what we should be doing to stay healthy and to live a long and happy life. So we'll ask Dr. Larkey to please turn on your webcam, and I will do likewise so we can see each other. And we'll start our dialogue. Hi, Linda.
Hi there. You forgot to tell them how long ago we met.
I know.
I believe it would have been 1976, because I can remember having my oldest son sitting on my lap, and I remember about how old he was when we met. So
yes,
yeah, a long time ago.
You are exactly right. You are exactly right. Yes. And it was a very fortuitous meeting for which I'm very grateful.
Right. I was grateful.
And Linda and I have helped raise our kids together. We've gone to a lot of A.R.E programs with the kids as well as on our own. And she is just an amazing teacher. Even in 1976, you were an amazing teacher, and you still are. So I look forward to our discussion tonight. So our format, and we're going to be doing some things experientially, is to basically go through some questions and see where the discussion takes us. We have 5 questions here, and I did want to ask the audience, if you have your own questions, you can type them in. Just click the Q&A little icon down at the bottom of your screen, and that will enable you to submit questions. So at the end, we're going to be taking your questions as well. So let's get started. We have, first of all, we want to talk about what Linda's called, for me, a stillness practice. And what in the world is that? And why is it important to have one?
So I define a stillness practice as those practices that we can engage in that still our mind and our heart. Both of those need to sort of come down to a centered point and help our nervous system reset, help our mind to stop the chatter, and to allow the natural resources that we have in our body, that the healing resources that we have, to activate. If we don't take time to really go quiet within, those natural biochemicals that do the job that they do to make their own medicine often don't get a chance to do it, because the opposite of a stillness practice is a anxiety practice. That is the way many of us live our lives, the way many of us run our activities, the way many of us use our brains in ways that are high level energy. And when we do that, we're stimulating cortisol, we're doing things that keep that system just a little bit too active for most of us in this society. We need to bring it down a notch and begin to find that quiet place within.
Mm-hmm. So what are some ways to do that?
So there are many different ways. And for most of you, if you just heard me say that, you'd be thinking, oh, she's talking about meditation. And yes and no, because there are ways to do these kinds of practices, some of them that focus mostly and first on movement and breathing and using those ways of tuning into the body and the present moment, that then helps still the mind and create this change in the heart-brain connection. There are other very specific kinds of meditations. And what I tend to go back to, because even though I had been exploring and practicing and trying my best to meditate all the way through my early teens up until the time I landed at the clinic in my mid to late 20s, when I finally got some training on this idea that Edgar Cayce was promoting, and that was the idea that our focus needs to be on the ideal. And that word, it sounded really old-fashioned to me at first, but as I began to work with that idea, that if we take an idea that is representative to us of the highest good, of that which is expressing the God or the goddess within, that we're able to channel from the outside and from the inside through that lens of the ideal and begin to create changes in the system. And he talked about it in very much in a way that wasn't just, this is just about the mind. He talked about it very much in a way that indicated this is the guide that we need to have for our lives. You need to find what you consider to be, or what you would name that ideal, almost like a mantra, and then use that as part of what you focus on when you meditate. So it helped me get out of the place of saying, I got to clear my mind, I got to clear my mind, I got to, whether the teacher is John Kabat-Zinn or the teacher is, what's his name, Jeffrey Singer, with this latest book, The Untethered Soul, amazing book. There's none of them out there that says you can clear your mind. We kind of know that you can't. And so what we need to do instead is focus the mind. And whether it's a focus on flowing movement and the breath, or a focus on a candle, or focus on the ideal, then you have a practice that effectively functions as a stillness practice and accomplishes the goals that really were meant to be for what Cayce was recommending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I talk about that too in Magenta Nation, about even as part of the my stillness practice, focusing on the ideal for the world that we want to see. And having that, I've gotten into a routine now every morning of doing my own meditation, which is wonderful. So, you're talking about the physical benefits of having that stillness period, the mental benefits of how it works on your brain and your psyche, and then the spiritual benefits of being able to realize your own spirituality, our own path, and our own ideal, whatever that may turn out to be. So it's really very multifaceted.
One of the ways that we know that we're in that place that has, I won't say positive emotions, but emotions that are rejuvenating and that are sending out blessings to the world, there's a practice that uses a device that gives you feedback and allows you to see, am I in that place or not?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times we think, okay, I'm thinking good thoughts, I'm thinking this word, I'm thinking about it. But unless it gets down into the heart, and the heart is actually experiencing it, it doesn't have as much of that letting your body make its own medicine effect. And that kind of equipment, there are many different ones, but the one that to me is really aligned the most with this ideal is the heart math equipment. And it's biofeedback for this really powerful spiritual juice. It gives you a way of being able to see, am I entraining the rhythms of peace and kindness and appreciation into my heart in a way that actually makes a difference in the rhythm of my heartbeat. And so that, that's a very physiological way that's based on the neurophysiological system that tells you if you're doing well or not. And it kind of helps you get rid of that. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? So I love that work. And we have a lot of research around that now to see how that is a central feature and maybe a key mechanism for how a stillness practice actually makes a difference in the neurophysiological realm. And then that then translates into how the biochemistry in the body works and helps you heal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that was my next question, which was about the scientific evidence that the stillness practice enhances health. And you're bringing up the heart rate variability. And,
Yeah.
if there's a way we can test that to see that we're doing it right, that's fantastic.
Well, the heart rate variability biofeedback and the heart math equipment and others, a lot of them are out there under the names of stress, but most of them don't focus the way the heart math equipment does on not just reducing stress, but actually generating that rejuvenating juice inside. But the science around most stillness practices, there are studies now that are looking at yoga, that are looking at qigong, that are looking at meditation practices, and looking at how those affect heart rate variability, which we then know in turn affects other aspects of our lives, whether it's that biochemistry I'm talking about, or just affecting sleep, which we know is a really critical factor in our health, or it affects the way we manage our emotions, which is a critical factor in our health. So if you look at heart rate variability as a mediator, that's one piece of science that's beginning to happen more and more. But most of the research that's out there for meditation and for meditative movement practices like yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong, most of them look at the practice and the outcome. And they don't really think much about that black box of what is it that's making that happen. We're starting to do more of that. Some of it, I believe, because of the science we have around it, has to do with the slow, deep breathing. Some of it has to do with the stillness that's being created, the heart rate variability. Some people just say, oh, it's just exercise, and we know that exercise is medicine. But it's much more than that. And what we find is that meditation, meditative movement like Qigong and Tai Chi have all been shown to be very healthful. And I say healthful in many ways for mental health, for reducing inflammation in the body, which usually then in turn reduces pain, reduces joint inflammation, reduces the potential of developing. It actually reduces your risk for Alzheimer's disease. It has impacts on just overall physical function, range of motion, balance, especially the Tai Chi practices and the Qigong practices show an effect on that. What are we missing here? The psychological factors, I think, are a powerful piece of this, that we also know physical activity helps, but even at very low levels of physical activity, it is the stillness part of it that seems to help the psychology. And there's an interesting one. We did a comprehensive review of the health benefits of Tai Chi and Qigong. Now, yoga has a lot of this too, but a number of years ago. And it was looking at the literature that was available then in 2010, the whole field has exploded. I mean, we had 67 randomized controlled trials then on just Qigong and Tai Chi. Now there's hundreds and hundreds. You couldn't do a review like that without saying, we got to divide this up into about 20 papers. But back then we were able to see the psychological benefits, the self-confidence around balance and walking, the physical benefits, the improvement in the immune system, which is some powerful research. They're literally changing and building your immune system. You want to talk about, doing well in this time of COVID, take good care of yourself with a meditative movement practice. But here's an interesting one. We also found back then, there's many more now, 3 randomized control trials showing benefit for bone health. Now, most people think that the way to prevent osteoporosis is to have weight-bearing exercise. And most of these Tai Chi and Qigong practices are very gentle movements. Yeah, a little bit with the Tai Chi where you lower your center of gravity and you get a little more resistance training in the thighs, but not much. And we were seeing that the bone health improvement, either maintaining bone health during the time of menopause or building it back up even after bones had started losing some of their density. It makes no sense in the medical world why that would be. And so, we have our chi theories. We have our, here's how chi circulates this and that in the body, but we don't entirely understand why it would help bone health to the extent that you would think you would need. Most of those studies pump you full of estrogen and then make you work out with weights, and that's how you build bone, and it's so incremental. So it's kind of amazing that we see bone health with that too.
That really is amazing, and it's extremely encouraging. I'm sold. Got to do this.
Yeah.
And there were some exercises that Edgar Cayce recommended, which are not. They're similar to some of the disciplines of the meditative movement that you've been talking about. Maybe we should talk about exercise now. And if there's anything that you'd like to share with us about some movements that you have found particularly useful or powerful.
Sure. So, many years ago, I got involved in the American College of Sports Medicine, and most people that are in there are into this, moderate to vigorous version of physical activity. And I came in and started talking about Qigong and Tai Chi, and well, isn't that just some kind of exercise? It's just not enough, is it? They're not really getting enough strength training and enough aerobic exercise and whatever. And said, yeah, but there's some other things going on here. And even so, there are many things about exercise that is medicine. And as they're beginning to open up to the idea that even exercise and good nutrition aren't enough to feed the body what it needs, you need that other, a stillness practice or a meditative movement practice. They're beginning to understand that a little bit better. But here's what I found years ago. You remember I taught yoga at the clinic.
Yes.
In 76. And that was long before you had to have yoga certification. But, someone taught me and I taught it, and that's how we did it back then. You teach what you know. And I didn't have yet until like the year 2000, I didn't have a Qigong practice. I've worked much more now with Qigong, but I remembered some of those exercises. And when we came into learning some of the real basic Qigong movements, I think this feels really familiar. So I noticed that there were a number of things that were similar about those exercises that Cayce had recommended. And Cayce talked about exercise very much in the way that Qigong and yoga are talked about. And that is that it's less about the exercise and it's more about creating a flow in the energetics. And, he even talked about the electricity in the body and stimulating certain organs and glands in ways. I mean, yoga very clearly does even more of that than much of the Qigong does. But I could share with you a couple of examples of where this overlap is, if you'd like to see that.
Yes.
I'm going to move my laptop here, and you can tell me if I'm in the right position so that you can see me And I think if I move back to about here, can you hear me well enough?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
good. Okay. So, and you can see the top of my head. You might not be able to see all the way down to my feet, but
Yeah,
that's
we
okay.
can see from the top of your head to your feet. Looks good.
And I'm just going to show you the exercise, and then, you can guess. Do you think this is a Qigong exercise or a Casey exercise? Hands on hips, feet about shoulder width apart, knees soft, and you can follow along and do this with me. And then just take your hips and make a great big circle. I think one of the examples when Casey described it was like you're trying to scrape the edges of a barrel. Just imagine a big barrel around you and you're using your hips to ring around that barrel. Breathe with the movement and then go the other way. And you do this only as far as it's comfortable. So if some of you find that just doing a little circle, you have a little barrel, that's okay. It's comfortable. And then see if you can make it a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. Well, one of the first things that I learned in practicing even Tai Chi are these Qigong warm-ups that start with sort of rotating your foot and then your knee and then your hip. And then the other way, the foot, the knee, and the hip. And then the last of it is, oh, here we go. Barrel, hip rotation. Good thing to start the day with and start opening up the energies here in the lower back and making your lower back a little more flexible, the spine.
Mm-hmm.
Give you another one that is also highly recommended for morning, and that is, we call it in Qigong, twisting at the waist. And it just simply twists as if you have a pole down through the center of your body, turning from side to side, and very gently letting your head turn with the movement, letting your arms flow with the movement. And I like to teach it saying, it's like your arms are hanging off a hanger like an old sweater. And so you'll see that when I start turning my head around with it, if my arms are really swinging like an old sweater, they'll come up a little bit and tap me right here on the side and right here in the back. So in the back, you'll see I'm tapping on my kidneys. That's the Qigong version. And in the Casey exercises, it's just called twisting at the waist. It's like this. So same. Almost identical exercises. There's one more that I'll share, and it's just because it's so much fun. There's just an exercise called Jangle, and it's in the Casey exercises. It's just kind of like, just let everything hang loose, like the scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz. And in Qigong, there is a practice that is exactly the same. It includes just this sort of moving around. It also includes lifting up a foot now and then and shaking that out. So you get a jangle that is one-footed. And then there's another aspect to it that just says, okay, now just bounce very gently on the heels. And if you're trying this with me, which I encourage you to do, be very, very gentle. Don't slam down or hurt your knees. Be very gentle with your knees. The knees are soft, not stiff, but bent. And then let your hands just kind of flop like so. What do we call this? Bag of bones. We don't call it jangle, we call it bag of bones. You find if you just do this for a while, it's like not exercising, but it actually does start to get your heart rate going a little faster. And one of the things you can do with this is if you allow yourself to let these muscles go here so that with each bounce, you feel your shoulders just yielding more and more to gravity and start making a little sound with it. Add in a nice deep breath. We're going to do one more version of the jangle or bag of bones. And that is reach down and imagine that you're just gathering, gathering as you inhale, 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 gathering up from earth all the way to the sky, and then let it all go with a blither. And I always say, if your butt cheeks aren't waving in the wind, you're not doing it right. So that was a lot of fun. Always like to make sure we add that one to the exercises.
You know, that was amazing and so much fun. These, and I did not realize the similarity. It sounds like that
Oh,
the ancient masters and
yeah.
Casey were kind of on the same wavelength in terms of giving us this advice about exercise and movement. And these are, as we are spending so much time, inside and maybe in front of the computer and maybe in front of the TV. These are wonderful things to do. You don't have to be out jogging. You don't have to be at the gym. And my back felt so much more relaxed just watching you. These are going to be great, to relieve that tension that we may get from our, computer posture and so forth.
I'm glad to hear you got some contact calm out of that.
Yes.
That's great.
It was great. I actually
Yeah.
do a lot of the Casey stretches when I am watching TV. And it's
Yeah.
just amazing what these simple movements can do in terms of releasing stress, calming you down, getting rid of those kinks, the back cracks and the shoulder,
Right.
the things that you get when you're sedentary most of the day, which a lot of us are.
Right.
So this is wonderful.
So I shared really, really basic stuff. There's some more that are a little more yoga-like, and have ways that you're turning and twisting and holding and then pressing into organs in ways that are just helping them to kind of get their mojo back, get a little stimulation of the glands. Some of the things in yoga that work with the head and neck to stimulate the glands in the thyroid area are all very practical. It's like he just picked out of the air some of the best things of both. But the real fact is, from what I understand, is that what he was doing was taking some of the things back from ancient Egypt that were then have been disseminated through many, many different cultures over time. I've always kind of been intrigued with the fact that most cultures have some map of the energy of the body. And it was before we looked inside the body and got information about the organs. And so it was more based on the energy and the light that they could see back maybe in a time when civilization didn't suppress the ability to see that as they were raising their children. And so we have maps of the body, we have paintings of the different and the energies of the body that are from many, many different cultures that map onto each other pretty closely, whether they're out of Africa or the Ayurvedic traditions. Time meridians look a little different from the Chinese meridians, but they're close. They found pretty much the same pressure points. I just think it's fascinating when you look at it. So what I think is that he was tuning back into a very ancient time, and that our humanness and our ability to see and recognize the energetics of our humanness were translated into many versions in different cultures. Yeah.
Well, we'll send out the Casey exercises to everybody after the program, as well as we'll send the opportunity to participate in a meditative movement study. So stay tuned for that. But I hope everybody's as excited about being able to rejuvenate with all of this and enhance our bone density, as you say, without having to take up kickboxing or something extreme, which we can't. Many of us can't do right now. Also want to talk about there's a lot of opinions about what we eat and how it affects our health. And Casey had his recommendations, which were, primarily 80% of your diet is fruits and vegetables, and meat and other things very sparingly. And so we're going to show you a diagram right now of what the Casey diet looked like. That's the one on the right. This is what's called the basic diet. And in the middle, it's fruits and vegetables, a ratio of 2 to 3 above ground vegetables, especially green, yellow, to 1 below ground, extra virgin olive oil, fruit, almonds, water, and fruit juices as number 1. And then as you go out from that circle, the next one is meats and some breads. And then further, we get some other things like eggs, spices, white potatoes, a little bit of red wine in here. And then on the 4th circle are the things try to avoid, if at all possible. The fried foods, the certain food combinations, too much alcohol. And then on the left side, Linda, do you want to explain this one?
Sure. I started working in the area of researching how to promote eating more fruits and vegetables through work sites and peer health educators back in, let's see, 1998 or somewhere in there. The National Institutes of Health and the CDC had come out with, we should be eating 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables. We put it on the bags in the grocery store. We really tried to promote it throughout the country. Many studies were set up to see if we could do a better job of promoting it. And this is a much later iteration. Earlier, we had this thing called the food pyramid, and it was a little backwards from promoting that much fruits and vegetables. We all said behind the scenes, we knew, and we said, it's 9 or more is really what we should be aiming for fruits and vegetables. But we know that most people are eating 2 or 2.5. So let's just see if we can aim for 5. And that was the big deal back then, to try to get people up to 5. And the food pyramid reflected that, with the bottom of the pyramid being the biggest part, the biggest chunk of it was grains, really grains, and whole grains, and eating those breads and starches and stuff. And then the next one up was fruits and vegetables. So we're trying to be realistic back then and saying we're not going to get people to eat that much of this. To me, this plate, my plate, is a progression. It's moved forward a little bit. So at least half of the plate should be fruits and vegetables. And then that makes it a lot less protein and grains and dairy. But if you look at that and compare it to the Casey basic diet, we're moving in that direction. I think we're going to keep moving in that direction when we look at the research on, well, it really should be 9 servings of fruits and vegetables, not just 5, as we begin to acknowledge that people may have a difficult time reaching it, but let's go ahead and promote it. But I think we're moving in that direction, but we're not there yet in the way these things are promoted. What I want to point out, and Joy already said it, is that this basic diet, it's number 1 is supposed to be 80% of your diet. Number 2 is supposed to be 20% of your diet. There ain't nothing left after that. Just kind of, if you're doing the math. And that was just a way to communicate that basically said, when you look at your plate, you should see most of your plate filled up with fruits and vegetables, not all this other stuff. It shouldn't be a big slab of meat in the middle of the plate and then decorated with a little piece of broccoli on the side. That was not what he was recommending. And that's what a lot of our diets have been, especially back then. I'm curious now, as I watch this plant-based diet kind of thing being promoted, and even vegan diets being promoted that just say, let's just get rid of everything animal. I know that dietitians will tell you that for the most part, there are a few things that would be missing from your diet, and that there are some ways to make that up with supplements. But I'm really thinking that eventually we'll lean back into understanding both for the health of the planet, and there are going to be some people out there that might argue with me, because I know that there's some films that have some good information, but not the full information on why it is still good for the planet for us to have ecosystems that are fully balanced. And that would include the way the food chain has worked for long before humans even came on the scene, that we can still eat a plate that has a small amount of protein derived from animals. And if one chooses not to do that, back in the day when I was teaching diet, the Casey way classes at the clinic, I also taught out of the Diet for a Small Planet book, which was back then came out as a way to not eat meat at all and to get your full complement of all the amino acids in the proteins through plant sources. And so there are ways to do that. But I also think that the balance, as long as many of the cultural diets that use meat as a little condiment practically, a little bit of toasted turkey over here, a little bit of whatever, and that the bulk of the food was primarily vegetables based and or fruits with grains. But those are fairly healthy cultures. The people that live in those places that eat that way have done pretty well.
Mm-hmm. We could, diet is fascinating because we all eat and,
Yeah.
Everybody participates. I did want to bring up the fact that, our environment today is a lot different than it was in Casey's time, where people naturally ate mostly locally grown products and very few things were processed, as opposed, and pesticides weren't in such wide use, and there's just many changes.
Right.
What should we do to kind of compensate for that? I mean, should we just follow the guidelines anyway, or are there some specific things we should try to be aware of to make sure that we're really getting what Casey thought we would get if we followed those guidelines?
Exactly. No, and I think you're making a really good point there, is that what he was recommending was based on what you buy in the grocery store back then. We don't buy those same things in the grocery store now. Our soils are more depleted. There's a lot more ways that we mess with our produce to make it look a certain way, whether it's GMO manufacturing using a lot more pesticides than we did, and even making the plants GMO so that they can bear the pesticides and still produce. So you're right. I think the choices, if he had been around and would have been able to say something about this, he would have been recommending the diet he was recommending back then. And what we were getting in our produce was mostly organic. What we were getting in our meats was mostly grass-fed cows and wild caught fish. And so the ways that our animals are now, our livestock are now being fed, I would say don't even touch that stuff. It's, for me, one of the examples is if you take salmon that's been farmed and you take salmon that's wild caught, you're getting not only differences in the level of toxicity that's in there, but you're getting different nutrients. The salmon that is wild caught has produced a very different profile of fats, so that you're getting those, the omega-3s the way you would want to. And the ones that are farmed have been given different kinds of food that make a difference. The same with the cows, is that you actually, most people don't know this. You eat the meat of a grass-fed cow, you're getting a lot of the same fats that you get in a wild-caught salmon. The omega-3s are produced when the cow is being fed GMO corn mash and the things that they feed them. They're not getting the same kind of thing. They're not out in the sunshine eating the grass that's been built out of the sunshine and the chlorophyll. They're not getting the same food. And so they're producing a meat and a fat that has a very, very different content, and the health of it is different. So, I'm remembering there was some kind of a meat juice product that Casey recommended. It was for people who were, I think, frail. There was something, their digestive tract had gone way off, or do you remember why they were prescribed it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was when for cases of cancer, or when people were severely ill. That's my recollection.
And the meat juice was just allowing the juices from the meat to come out of it, and then to just, like have a teaspoon of that. It was like a very small amount of medicine. And I hate to think of doing that with our meats now, unless you go to something that was raised more like what it would be back then. So no, I agree with you. Think back to what would that product have looked like? Where would it have been sourced back in the 20s? You've got a better handle on following his diet the way that it was prescribed.
Yeah. When I remember another thing he's talked about was eating a lot of greens, celery, carrots to keep away colds. And that was also kind of coupled with the beef juice. I think it's almost like you were, you go on a vegetable juice diet. We have a couple questions, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. Um, uh, One thing that was really important in the Casey readings for health and spiritual growth was he advised us to be of service and to be dedicate our time to helping other people. He also talked about things like massage, and I mean, he didn't necessarily get into the value of spiritual connection, physical connection, but we all know that that is a health producing activity, when we're hugging and when we're connecting, and when the heart chakra opens, and we're feeling the love, whether it's our pet or our family, or our friends. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, like in lieu of, we can't really touch each other. We're not in a position right now to go out and get a massage. We may not be able to go out and work with a group to provide service, but what can we do to keep our hearts open during this time, and even experience that healing touch and share it?
That's a good question. I think the work that we've been doing around the issues of meditative movement and oxytocin, which we know is most people think of the oxytocin as the social hormone or the bonding hormone. And it is generated in many different conditions, all the way from the most intimate one that you can think of, where a baby is nursing. I mean, that's so physically intimate, and that generates oxytocin. But it also happens with women sitting together around a table and sharing tea and sharing conversation, which does not require touching. And so what I would like to take this down to is, if the core issue around keeping the heart chakra open and keeping that bonding hormone open and flowing in the system, is it does respond to touch, but it also responds to the experience of connection. And so whether or not you can actually, when the pandemic first started, I had a group of staff where we would meet once a week, not work, and just sit and sit on our patios or wherever we were alone, most of us, and have a glass of wine. And we called it our oxytocin session. It's like we would chat and visit and laugh together and feel the feelings of being together as if we were together, and without any touch at all. You could just feel the juice flowing. It wasn't just the wine, it was just getting on, and you could feel your heart opening. It was just so much of a blessing to do that. So I think that's one of the ways that we can do it, is that we stay in touch with people and use the connection of our words, and if we have the visual, maybe a little wine. No, the wine's not the important part. But the things that we did before to socially gather, do them virtually and allow your heart to open. Some people get tired of Zoom, but if you can use it for those purposes and feel your heart opening during that time, that's great. Then there is another, and this is something that made me start doing the research around oxytocin with Qigong. I am alone a lot. Even before the pandemic, I have a little tiny place that is up on a mountain, a 3-acre lot in the mountains above San Diego. And I get out on my front dirt with my feet on the ground, and I'm practicing Qigong. And one of the things that we teach, that we work with in the Qigong practice, and many of the meditative movement practices do this, so you don't have to learn Qigong, but just hear what I'm saying here, is going out into nature, breathing it in, looking at the sights around you, noticing the sounds of the birds, and letting that lull your heart into a sense of connection with nature and God. I mean, there is nothing to me that has more profound feeling of connection with God than being outdoors like that in nature. And in fact, there are plenty of people that go and get that kind of feeding and use their outdoor time to be in a place of worship, to be connecting with their hearts, with the divine, and using the experience and the imagination. Some of you may remember, if if you dive into the Casey readings, he talks about the imaginative forces.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I
Yes.
remember when I first read that, it's like, well, what is that? You know, that sounds like imaginary, but he's actually talking about how the mind and the heart works, that when you develop an intention around something and see and imagine. So if I'm indoors and I can't be up in my little mountain home, but I'm just standing in my third floor apartment here all alone, and I imagine my feet, I imagine the way my feet feel on the ground up there. And when I bring in the energy from around me, I imagine the trees and the color and the birds and the sounds and the sky above. And I bring that in. That's an imaginative force that has a powerful impact on your physiology. So it is the imaginative forces that begin to change all the way down to the cellular level. And so back to your question, the bonding, the connection doesn't require skin. It requires that you hold and remember and appreciate what it is that you are connected to, where your heart is connected, and bring that in, breathe that in, hold it, and let it immerse you in that feeling. Yeah, it's not just a feeling, it changes you.
Yes. And that was very in line with what Casey said about nature. You know, over and over again, he said, worship in nature, be in nature. It's very healing.
Absolutely.
Yes. Immerse, go out and forest bathe.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, thanks, Linda. This has been really inspirational. Let's check on some of our questions. Some here are about diet. What about the idea of a specific diet related to your blood type? And you know, this advice came out a few years ago that based on your blood type, you should be eating a certain foods that were more compatible with your physiology. So, what do you think about that?
So I am very, very pro blood type diet and committed to it. So whoever is asking this, I am not aware of there being anything like this in the Casey readings around it. So I'm not giving you a Casey answer, but I will tell you that the first few times somebody brought it up to me, like, I don't know, 15 years ago, it had been around for a little while. I remember thinking, that is ridiculous. So what does that mean? You eat blueberries because you got blue eyes, or, you know, like, how silly is that? And then just to see how silly it was, the book was sitting in a bookstore, you know, up on the front shelf. And I just like, oh, I'll just take a look at how silly this is. And I start reading this. Oh my gosh, this is based on science around the way that your blood type rejects or accepts the lectins in foods that are there and available. And for some blood types, it sees this lectin as a poison, as something to reject, and another not so much. You ever saw any of the Gundry stuff? Dr. Gundry talks about like the skin of the bell pepper has this and this and this lectin in it. And he just sort of trashes all the lectins. You got to peel everything in his book. But I think he's right on, because he's probably hit on what are some of the foods that are most destructive in the digestive tract for people that are of the most popular blood type. And O is not that good with dairy. So if you're an O type, then, you know, maybe that's something to cut back on. If you're B, like me, I'm one with dairy. You know, for those of you who miss your milk, I can really do milk, especially goat's milk. But here's what happened. When I started just reading more about it, I thought everybody ate and then had pain. I thought everybody within an hour after a meal was kind of like, oh, excuse me, I think I need to go to the other room so I can double over in pain. I was like that I can remember being like that at age 14. I was big on eating the whole grain muffins, and especially the wheat bran muffins. Talk about ripping my guts apart. The wheat is like one of the worst things, but especially not just whole wheat in general, but it is the bran and the husk that are the worst for my gut as a B. There are other blood types that can eat that and do okay with it and digest it okay. So to me, that was an explanation for why certain foods, but I never thought about it, but certain foods were creating even more pain than others. And when I shifted that, I mean, I can still tell, because the blood type diet says like eat more of this and less of that. I can still tell if I eat the things that are on my really, really hardly ever eat those things. Kind of like the outer circle of the Casey diagram, except there's different foods in there for different people, depending on your blood type. I can tell if I go off it for a few days that I start getting kind of really uncomfortable again and bloated. And for the most part, if I stick with it, everything down below is much more comfortable. So I think that there's a lot to it. The problem is that it's been difficult to get any kind of funding for it, to do the research, because it's not the kind of thing that's easily commercialized.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of dietary things have not been picked up by the people that do the dietary research.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had my own good experience with it. I know a number of people who have. It's not about weight loss, although they do say that because you're reducing inflammation in the gut, you're going to often lose some weight, eating things that are more fitting with your immune system and your blood type.
Okay.
That was a long answer, sorry,
No,
but
that's
I had a
good.
story.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that.
Yeah.
I know we have a variety of different blood types in our family, and one of my children has been made a huge changes in diet based on that, and it's feeling so much better.
Oh,
A couple more diet questions here about the lectin-free diet. If you have leaky gut, if that is recommended, and also what about advice to not eat raw fruit with other foods, but to eat them between meals?
so I'll go back to the first question, and that would be Edgar Casey, as far as I remember. And I mean, I sat in that office full of those drawers for a long time, so I read a lot of the stuff, but it was a long time ago. I'm not sure that I remember that there was anything that would have suggested that. But I would say that it does make sense. There's the lectin-free diet is, I think, pretty much what Gundry is recommending. I think there are a couple other people that are out there doing that. And I get that you might be more precise by doing a diet that is based on your blood type, because that is about lectins, but that they vary by blood type. But if you just give them all up for a while, you'll probably you'll have a happier gut. So I wouldn't put it down. I would just say you might want to look into being more precise. I would also suggest for a lot of people thinking about doing like food sensitivity things. And in our world now, we have a lot more allergens, a lot more things that trigger off histamines in our systems, and to be able to get down to a diet that's not triggering so much of that is probably a good idea. I do want to just say that I'm around a lot of nutritionists and a lot of people doing nutrition studies. I've looked into a lot of this information. This is not answers based on Casey's readings, nor on all the good research that's out there, because there's mixed messages on a lot of this stuff. So I'm not an authority at all, but I'll tell you my own experience and then say where you might want to start experimenting. And then the second part of that question was?
It was about eating fruits, not with other things, and especially raw fruits. And also, why was there a prohibition against raw apples?
The Casey diet, the Casey recommendations, if I remember, Joy, and you might be able to remind me here, or that wheel, we can pull that back
Yeah,
up.
let's pull the
I think it was
wheel
like
up.
melons should be eaten alone or leave them alone. I think I remember apples should be eaten alone or leave them alone.
And citrus,
And
there were some
citrus, oh my goodness,
prohibitions
citrus.
or some advice about, like not like if you're going to eat cereal, don't eat citrus at the same
Yeah.
time.
So the only way that I can comment on this is that this is what he recommended. And I think he was really tuned into some important stuff here. I had gone many years of not having milk with my coffee, and I'm a coffee drinker. We've gone back and forth with the research information on that. It's pretty good now. But not having milk with my coffee. And then I realized I'd sort of forgotten that for many years. I'm back to just trying nut milks and such. So I'm not putting cow's milk or goat's milk in my coffee. And I think it's making a little bit of difference in my digestion. But I would say, here's the best thing that you can try doing. Try doing it the way he suggested doing it for a while. And then try breaking the rule and see how your digestive tract reacts to that. Now, some people aren't as sensitive as, like, I must have a really sensitive system or I wouldn't have been in so much pain not being on the blood type diet. But I think that a lot of the ways that you can find out about what your own body's digestive system does is try these things out by, following the rule for a while and then breaking it and see if it creates problems. And the only problem with that as a solution is that some of the things that are in these restrictions around don't eat this with that, sometimes you don't feel a difference in your own system, that they create chronic effects over a long, long, long period of time. A lot of the advice around the blood type diet is like that, saying, you won't notice it at first. It takes a long time for it to begin to change what's going on in your system. But to me, the best advice is give it a try. Work with those things, and rather than beat yourself up if you don't do it, listen to your body and say, well, how did that feel?
That's the best advice of all, I think. And we did want to talk about this study in meditative movement that people can sign up to participate in. I know I'm definitely signing up. This is one of the things, of course, Linda, that you do is manage these studies.
Yeah.
Did you want to say a little bit about this one?
Sure. So a lot of my research is big studies funded by the National Institutes of Health, and then sometimes we get a group of students that want to do this or that. And this is a group of students that's working with me, so I'm overseeing all of it. But they've been fantastic in setting this up, and it's using Tai Chi Qigong like movements in a study that is free for you to participate in. You end up with a few weeks first of being sort of a run-in time where you're getting just education texts on your phone. And then after that, you're doing 8 weeks of these free online classes. So there's not a lot of time involved in doing it, but you're invited to practice the Qigong Tai Chi heart-focused movement kind of practice every day. And if you don't do it every day, we just want to know when you do it. And you get a little gift card at the end. So you'll notice in the fine print there, you have to be 55 to 85 years old. I'm going to guess that some of the people in this session today might not have that be within that age group, but we have to.
Some of us are.
Some of us are, and so it's data is collected over Zoom, so you don't have to see anybody in person. It's all done online.
And we're going to send this flyer to everyone. It has a link in it that you can click through, and the phone number, in case you want that right now, is 602-496-0889.
Thank you, Joy.
Sure. So we're coming to the end of our time together. This has been so enlightening and energizing. I'm just so pleased. Thank you so much. We wanted to say a couple of things about resources here that you can get our newsletter, be part of study groups. This is Dr. Larkey's website. If anyone has any questions, though, you can also contact us here through our Edgar Cayce website, our Facebook, our Meetup. We have a website also for Magenta Nation and Edgar Cayce of California. So there's lots of places here to go to get more information and participate. And then I did want to mention that we are having our next event on Sunday, March 21st with Marianne Splenda on the Cayce remedies. Most of his readings did deal with health, and he came up with a number of different remedies that over and over again proved how effective they are. And of course, we use these at the clinic. They're still available for purchase in various sources. And so we're going to look at your Cayce medicine cabinet here and what really you should have on hand for various situations that might come up. And Marianne has done a lot of study in this area. She's the coordinator for A.R.E in Northern California and also on the A.R.E Board of Trustees. So that brings us to our end. I want to thank you so much, Linda, for sharing your knowledge and enthusiasm and advice with us this evening, and everybody who joined us. We'll send you a link to this presentation. We have been recording it. And any final words, Linda, before we have to sign off?
No, but this was a delightful conversation with you, Joy. I had fun and I learned some things. Thank you.
Yes, I did too. I did too. Someday we'll have to have a session just on food. And just to let everybody know, Linda's the most creative cook I've ever met. And she has all kinds of ways to incorporate these health recommendations into your diet that are fun and delicious. So thank you so much, everybody. Wishing you a great, healthy evening and year. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.